Good afternoon, everyone. A huge weekend in New York sports. Not a lot of good stuff, but there was one thing that hasn't happened in 15 years. The Yankees did clinch the World Series. Definitely going to spend a lot of time talking about that. But it seems like New York football can't get on track. Both sides here. Even with the addition of Devontae Adams, the Jets are still looking very shaky. Going to touch on that a little bit. The Rangers have had a huge start. I mean, playing a lot better than I thought, that a lot of people thought. Definitely going to touch on that. Knicks have another injury at a position that was a worry earlier on, and then they made a trade to address that position, but going to touch on that as well. A lot of things to touch on here. Navy's a ranked football team, going to touch on that as well, just because it's my personal interest there, and I really like to talk about some things that aren't really talked about much. So I'm going to start off today's show talking about the ALCS recap and what happened with the Yankees versus Guardians. I mean, this series could have easily been a sweep for the Yankees. I mean, they had the lead in game three. They obviously won game four. They showed a lot of desire to win. I really like the attitudes post game by especially Giancarlo Stanton talking about that's not the trophy he wants to be holding, referring to the fact he was holding the American League championship series most valuable player trophy. And he said, I want to hold the next one. I mean, that's what the Yankees are all about. It seems like that first move back in 2018, that was kind of the start of the Yankees' new competitive period there. To see a guy like Giancarlo Stanton really show up in a series that meant so much to the Yankees, a series that sent the Yankees back to the World Series. I mean, he had 4 home runs that series. I mean, there was only 4 hits, but when you talk about those home runs, those were some huge home runs he hit. I mean, talk about game 5. The home run he hit there was the home run that not only put them um, in the position to win the game, but it put them in the position to make it to the World Series. It put them in a point where Juan Soto could get up and have that spectacular at bat he had later on. Talking about that Juan Soto at bat, I mean, a lot of people are talking about that at bat. I mean, it's a textbook baseball at bat there. You want to get the pitch you want. Hunter Gaddis had thrown 6 balls or 6 non-fastballs before he had thrown the fastball to Soto, and Soto kept fouling those balls off because he knew the pitch he wanted. He wanted a fastball, and he made Hunter Gaddis throw it, and Hunter Gaddis paid for it there. Um, there are a few issues I saw there, but I'm still going to focus on the positives because there were just so many of them. I mean, the Yankees bullpen continued to be spectacular this series. I mean, yes, we saw the shakiness of Clay Holmes. I'm definitely going to touch on that when I talk about their matchup against the Dodgers that's going to be coming up this week. But the positives for this team, I came into this postseason thinking the Yankees were the most complete team, and they've continued to show it game in and game out. Game 3 to me was the critical game for the Yankees in the championship series because they or game 4, sorry, win 3 for the Yankees, was the critical game because that was the game where they could either do what they've done the past 15 years where they haven't made the World Series and let that one loss, yes, it was a crushing loss, it was a walk-off for Cleveland there. They could have let that easily get to them, and instead, they kept pushing. I mean, that's what it takes in the postseason. You can't let 2 runs, you can't let 1 run be the deciding factor in a game. You just have to keep thinking that you're better than the other team, that you want it more. And I mean, the fan base definitely has wanted it for so many years, and now it's starting to look like the players want it too. Um, Really, I like pointing to the attitudes of the players like Giancarlo Stanton, but Jazz Chisholm really started that whole energy, that positive energy, and I feel like that move. Yes, he hasn't been playing well in the postseason. Yes, do I think he should be dropped in the lineup? Definitely, but he brought an energy to this Yankees team. Yes, Soto did as well, but I feel like Jazz has been more vocal about it. And when you're vocal about how you feel about your team, that you want it, and Jazz has went out and said he thinks they're going to be World Series champions. Do I think that's a little bit of overconfidence there? Yes, because I'm talking about the energy, but when you when you're a player and you're a team, yes, you want to be confident, but you also want to be reserved in what you're saying. Because Dave Roberts, I saw, was saying we took care of the crosstown rivals. Like we're a better team than the Yankees. Like we're gonna win. Like LA is gonna get another parade. That's a little bit of overconfidence there, and you're taking the risk of lighting a fire under the Yankees. You're taking a risk of lighting a fire against the other team. Obviously, what Jazz has said has not had a negative effect yet, and I'm hoping it continues to not have one as New York looks for its 28th championship. I mentioned last week with Christian that Emmanuel Clase was made out to seem like the next Mariano Rivera, and Austin Hedges, the catcher for the Cleveland Guardians, even had an interview. I believe it was either Joel Sherman or John Heyman. He said that Emmanuel Clase is the best pitcher of all time, and they went on to clarify that yes, he believed he was better than Mariano Rivera. And I talked a lot about that last week, how Mariano Rivera was a different playoff pitcher. And if you're comparing yourself to Mariano Rivera, you better prove it, especially as the catcher, the one that's seeing all these different pitchers. Austin Hedges has been in the league for a while now, too. He's known for being one of the best game callers, one of the best defensive catchers. Um, you got to go out there and make sure you're calling the right pitches to back up what you said, and he didn't. That was one case, I think, of overconfidence there. You cannot be comparing someone to Mariano Rivera because it puts a lot of pressure on you as the catcher, the one that was saying it, but also the pitcher, because now he has to go out there and make sure he doesn't make a singular mistake. The Yankees really did well against the best bullpen in baseball, and they're going to be facing a team. Obviously, going to touch on this a little bit more when I talk about the World Series in general, but they're going to be facing a team that their pitching has been decimated. They obviously had a lot of injuries to that pitching staff. Walker Bueller is now working back from an injury. Yes, he's going to be on the roster. Really don't know how long he's going to pitch. Saw him pitch 4 innings against the Mets there, but that bullpen is very taxed. It's nowhere near the level of the Cleveland Guardians bullpen, and to see the Yankees go out there and hit a bullpen of that caliber is so great to see, because in the playoffs, managers have a very, very short leash with their starting pitching because bullpens are such a critical part in today's game. Um, I really think they're gonna have no issues with the Dodgers pitching overall. Gonna touch on that a little bit more, but the Cleveland Guardians bullpen was the best in baseball in the regular season, and the Yankees were able to get to that bullpen. They were able to do such a great job of adjusting to those pitchers. They saw them multiple times, and it seemed like every time they brought those guys out, like Hunter Gaddis and Emmanuel Clase, they got better with each time. One thing I do want to see from the Yankees, I mentioned Clay Holmes is I want them to stay away from Clay Holmes no matter what. I mean, Clay Holmes is a guy where he makes one mistake and it causes a huge spiral in his confidence and his play on the field. If you see Clay Holmes struggling, I want them to take him out no matter what. I've seen Clay Holmes blow multiple games in person this year. I've seen him blow multiple games on TV this year. He is not a guy I am confident in facing a Dodgers lineup with Mookie Betts and Shohei Ohtani. So I would definitely stay away from him. But um, the emergence of Mark Leiter, this series, I mean, obviously Ian Hamilton went down with a brutal injury we saw in Game 4. They really need Mark Leiter to show up and take that position that Ian Hamilton held, and he did a great job the last 2 games of the series. I mean, he pitched 3 innings in Game 4, and He pitched an inning in game 5. Those games are back to back, and obviously that's a lot of workload on one pitcher in 2 games, but I mean, he hadn't pitched in a while, and to see him be the guy we wanted to get and acquire at the deadline in the postseason is definitely a promising sign for the Yankees there. I would lean towards Mark Leiter in the bullpen over Clay Holmes to set up Luke Weaver, obviously the shutdown closer. Talking about Luke Weaver, I have no worries when it comes to Luke Weaver. I mean, a pitcher in today's game with the amount of emphasis that teams put on the home run is a pitcher's just gonna give up a home run here and there. I mean, he had him down to 2 strikes. He definitely could have thrown a better 2-strike pitch there, but Luke Weaver's not a guy I'm worried about whatsoever. One last thing I want to see the Yankees do before they face the Dodgers is move Jazz down in the order. I mean, I love Jazz's energy. I love the attitude he brings on and off the field. I feel like he embodies that winning attitude that the Yankees do. But on-field production is really the thing that Aaron Boone and Cashman, whoever's making the lineup, should look at. And in the playoffs, Jazz has not been playing well. I mean, I think you move him down in the lineup a little bit, give him a little bit less stress on him to show up and play well. Definitely gonna, I think, improve the lineup overall. I think you move Rizzo up, move Jazz down. I think that's the correct move there for the Yankees. Now, the crosstown team that Dave Roberts mentioned, the New York Mets, obviously had a very um, Cinderella-esque story to get them to the point where they made it against the Dodgers in the National League Championship Series, a lot farther than a lot of baseball fans thought, a lot farther than their own fan base thought. To me, what's disappointing is I saw the Mets almost completely change their game plan once they faced the Dodgers. They were trying to do the most every single at bat instead of chip away and be that little pesky team that they had been all year. The team that I think used their attitude and their wanting to win, their camaraderie to win, and they focused more on themselves when they were up at the plate. They were over swinging. They were trying to get a home run every at bat. That's not what we saw from the Mets these past few months that got them to this point, that got them to the postseason, got them to face the Dodgers. They completely did a 360 or a 180 and were focused more on individual production. This is a Dodgers pitching staff the Mets should have feasted on, considering their offense was one of the best in the league this year. I mean, I talk about that Dodgers pitching staff. It was very fatigued coming into this series. It was very fatigued throughout the series. Obviously, the Dodgers did land up coming out on top there, but the Mets really should have been able to take advantage of it. They should have been able to take advantage of Walker Bueller coming back from an injury. They should have been able to take advantage of that bullpen that was pitching um, probably a majority of the game. I mean, they have a bullpen game every 4 games because they don't have 4 starters that they could put out there. And so they were seeing the same arms every game almost, but that Dodgers bullpen just proved too much for them. And it was very disappointing to see because I thought that Mets offense would be able to jump on that. That's one thing I mentioned coming into the series was I thought the Mets would be able to do a very good job and jump on the weaknesses the Dodgers have on their pitching staff. And I thought the thing the Mets would really need to be worried about was their pitching, which did prove to be the case in some games. I mean, they lost 9-0 the first game. They lost 10-2 one game. I mean, their pitching also wasn't fantastic. It was a little lackluster, which to me is one thing I mentioned coming into a World Series matchup between the Yankees and Dodgers. The Dodgers didn't have to face the pitching staff that the Yankees have. They had to face the Mets pitching staff, which isn't nearly as good. I think the Dodgers hitting was the factor that won them the series because I don't think the Mets pitching could keep up with a star-studded lineup like that. Obviously, with Otani, Betts, Freeman was injured for some of the series. He didn't play 1 or 2 games, but you always got to worry about him. I mean, he basically carried the Atlanta Braves without Ronald Acuna Jr. back in 2022. This That lineup is so good, incredibly good, probably the best in baseball, but I do think the Yankees lineup rivals that a little bit. Um, but yeah, that Dodgers hitting just proved too much for the Mets, and it was disappointing to see, definitely, for a Mets fan base that I feel like was finally starting to rally around their team a little bit. All right. So I touched on how the Dodgers pitching wasn't good. I even gave the Mets credit for getting to this point, but here's the point where I'm kind of going to turn on the Mets a little bit. The Mets had the highest payroll in baseball this year. I mention it almost every show. They had the highest payroll in baseball. This shouldn't be a successful season for the Mets. They should want to go out this all season and improve and get to the point where they could be in the World Series. They shouldn't just think, "Oh, we made it past a point where we didn't even think we were gonna get to." Like, they didn't even think they were gonna get to October baseball, and they did. This fan base needs to harp on their ownership and make sure they improve, because this is a Mets team with a lot of flaws. Their pitching is very weak. I mean, when you're relying on Sean Manaea and Jose Quintana, guys that have been in the league a while, yes, they're proven veterans. Um, their pitching staff is incomplete. I mean, Edwin Diaz hasn't been nearly the closer he was in 2022 and the closer he was with Seattle. And I mean, he's had more rough years with the Mets than he's had good years. I mean, handing out that contract was very silly to a guy that really only had one good year with you, but that's a whole other conversation there. This team is full of flaws. I mean, you really have to go out there and improve those flaws. I think their hitting is good enough, but even there, I would add someone because left field was definitely a hole. I mean, they were playing Jesse Winker one game and then Tyrone Taylor another. I mean, it really reminded me of the left field roller coaster the Yankees had before they acquired Juan Soto and Alex Verdugo. Their team is incomplete, and the fact that the Mets thought that this was a good enough team to compete at the deadline, because obviously at the deadline, I feel like is when they decided, okay, this is when we're gonna turn on that fourth year and go and acquire these guys to help us. Obviously, their bullpen, a lot of the guys they acquired at the deadline weren't even on their playoff roster. I didn't see Jake Diekman, who they acquired at the deadline. They left Adam Ottavino off the roster. Obviously, that was a free agency acquisition, but still, these are guys where they kind of just had to throw in names they hadn't even seen all year. They hadn't seen major league play, and they threw them on the playoff roster anyway. So when I talk about the Mets, it's the fans can't just give up on their team like they did this year, like they've done whenever they play poorly. They can't give up. They have to want to win, because if they give up, that means that ownership's going to give up because they're not seeing the support from their fans that makes it so they have that extra motivation to go out and improve the roster and make them a World Series champion. The fans are what dictate the energy. I keep saying that. The fans are what dictate what the owners do and what the players feel on the field. If the fans don't think they can win, then they won't. I saw in the championship series, I want to say when it came back to Queens in game 3, the energy wasn't anywhere near where I thought it would be. We were talking about this Mets team that was destined to win, the Mets team that was getting all of the media coverage because of all of these things that had happened with Grimace, with all of these social media stars going around them. I thought that they were going to be rallying around that, but the crowd was quite quiet when you talk about the City Field crowd, and it has to be better than that if you're the Mets. You have to want to win. You have an owner now that you have wanted for years, a guy that will go out there and spend money. You just have to support your team. You have to be there for them. Moving on from baseball for a little bit before I jump back into the World Series matchups and what my opinion really is on that. I've touched on a few things there, but I'm gonna touch on the New York Knicks. They had an injury to their backup center, backup power forward, Precious Achua. To me, I feel like a lot of Knicks fans are thinking of this as a similar situation to what happened last year, where Mitchell Robinson went down and Hartenstein went down, and they had to go out and sign a an ancient Taj Gibson to a deal, and just fill in with guys that obviously you don't want to see on a team that should be a finals contender. But I don't really see it as that. Achua is going to be out a few weeks. I mean, we could survive with Jericho Sims coming in to play 5 minutes a game. Like, Tom Thibodeau doesn't use his bench much to begin with. So when you lose a guy like Achua, yes, it's disappointing because he's a great backup center slash power forward, whatever you want to classify him as. Um, but it's not that big of a deal. I mean, Jericho Sims will be able to hold down 5 minutes a game. I'm pretty confident in that. I mean, he's shown flashes of being great. I mean, going into the season with Mitchell Robinson out, we thought that Jericho Sims was possibly going to be the starting center if they didn't put Randall there. So it's definitely not as bad as a situation as it was a few weeks ago before they acquired Carl Anthony Towns, but definitely a little worry there when you talk about a Knicks team that's dealt with struggles at center the past few years, maybe even the past decade. Um, but listen, you have Carl Anthony Towns now starting, and that's really the most important thing when you talk about it is who's going to be starting at that position, not who's going to be coming in for 5 minutes a game off of a Tom Thibodeau run team. Moving on to the Rangers. The Rangers have been playing above my expectations, above a lot of hockey fans' expectations. They moved up to 6-0-1. They only have the one overtime loss versus Utah. And I mean, that was a game where we saw something the Rangers should be great at, which is defense and goaltending turn against them. And since that game, I want to say the Rangers defense has been playing really well. I mean, they've only really given up 2 goals. They haven't given up many goals. They've been giving themselves a chance to win. And all of the players have been contributing. I talked about that before as well. Alexi Lafreniere has been scoring. I think he has 5 goals this season. Panarin's obviously going to score a bunch. He has 6. Kreider's been scoring a lot as well. The only worry there I wanna say, I thought was gonna be the 4th line, but it turns out really the big worry is that first line with Mika Zibanejad. Mika Zibanejad's been playing very lackluster hockey. Yes, he has 4 assists, but I think you have to attribute that to the fact he's on the first line and he's playing with guys like, Panarin and Kreider when Kreider is on the first line. If they don't rotate him to the second, it's really they rotate Kreider out from that first line sometimes, but that's besides the point. Um, Listen, Zibanejad's playing on a line where he should be seeing a lot of opportunities to score. He has one of the best setup players on his line in Artemi Panarin, and when you're not scoring and you're just kind of gliding by. I mean, he only has a 1 plus minus, which is better than I mentioned last week. I'm pretty sure it was negative last week. Um, so a little bit of improvement there from Zibanejad. I mean, he only has 1 goal scored this year. That's not the production we need from one of our stars. Yes, he's aging a little bit, but even the fact that he's aging, he still should be playing far above what he's playing right now. We should have seen him score at least 3 or 4 goals by now. We should have seen him have a game-winning play. We should see him be playing better. Obviously, his defense has always been an issue, but it seems like this year he's lost out there. He can't transition to the other side of the ice well at all. It's definitely someone I would consider moving down to the 2nd or 3rd line, maybe even the 4th line. I mean, you have to get him going somehow. So, I'm gonna talk about it too with football, but fans wanna see change when things aren't working. Like I talked about with the Yankees, they have to move Jazz down in the order. They have to move when it comes to hockey, they have to move Mika Zibanejad down in their lineups. They can't just keep putting the same things out there and expecting it to work. This is a Ranger team where, yeah, their window is closing. So when things aren't working, you have to make those adjustments if you're Peter Laviolette. You have to move players down, move players up in lineups. I mean, we've seen the youth on that fourth line come in big. Victor Mancini scored a goal the other night. I mean, this is a team where the young players are coming in and they're playing great, which was a huge factor coming into the season. We didn't know what the Rangers youth would provide when it came to that, and if it would be serviceable at the NHL level or if they would have to go and search for trades, which obviously with the cap constraints the Rangers have would be very tough. But it really seems like Mika Zibanejad has been the one negative that stands out in all of this. But I mean, it's overall a really strong start from the Rangers. I was worried coming in, but right now they have to just focus on what they've been doing well. They have to make some adjustments, obviously, with Spanajad, but a great overall start for the New York Rangers. A subject I didn't have time to talk about last week, but I definitely want to spend a lot of time talking about this week is the Navy football team is up to 6-0, and they are in the college football rankings. I talked about how I had never seen Navy football ranked. They are now currently ranked at 24. Army, I believe, is ranked at 22. Um, their schedule is a little weak, obviously, but this week is gonna be that big game I think I've been hyping up for most of my shows is they play Notre Dame this Saturday, and the line opened up at -12.5, which is a lot less than a lot of people thought, but even then, I think it's a little too high because Navy's been scoring like crazy. They won their last game 51-17 versus Charlotte. Charlotte had scored 50 points the week prior. And when their defense is able to hold a team that just scored that much the week prior, it's definitely a great sign there. I mean, you can't just throw that out. Their offense has been clicking on all cylinders this year, obviously with Blake Horvat and their running threats. But the Navy team is a great team, and I don't feel like they're getting enough credit there. I I think people are hyping up Notre Dame because it's obviously the reemergence of a classic program now. Yes, they lost to an unranked team earlier in the year, which gives me hope that Navy can win this week because it's any given Saturday in college football that anyone can win. You can't just expect Notre Dame to win because their name is Notre Dame. You have to look at the other side of the ball, and I mean, Blake Horvat has been one of the best triple threat quarterbacks in all of college football, not just in his conference, but definitely I would say the best threat quarterback I have seen from the Navy program since I've been alive. To have a guy like that under the helm, I feel like he gives you um, a chance to win every week, not just versus the bad teams, but versus a great program like Notre Dame. A big concern I have though this week is the fact they are facing a top 7 that is one of the best in the league, and Navy's, offensive playbook does run a lot. It relies a lot on the rush, obviously, with Blake Horvat and their 2 running backs that seem to average 100 yards every week. It's gonna be interesting for me to see if they can transition their game plan a little bit into throwing more, getting the ball in the air, looking for those big chunk plays that I feel like is the one negative we haven't seen from Navy this year. I just feel like this game is going to be a lot more exciting than people realize. It's a team that you didn't expect to be this good. They're undefeated. They're 6-0 versus a classic program in Notre Dame. It's a rivalry game that happens, I want to say, every other year for Navy. It's not just any old game where you're seeing an AAC team play a top team. You're seeing another top team play another top team. That's what it should be advertised as. It shouldn't just be advertised as a walk in the park for Notre Dame this week. I mean, Navy's now ranked. They're getting recognition. I think that's going to be in the back of their head a little bit as they go into Saturday, as Navy is a lot better than they thought. And definitely a game I am looking forward to. I'm looking forward to see if Navy can take that next step that I feel like no one thinks they're able to and beat a team that they on paper probably shouldn't beat. But it's the underdog story, and I everyone loves a good underdog story, and I wish that they were given that more coverage. Staying on the topic of football, I'm gonna move over to my New York Giants, who have been definitely very playing very poorly since they had that promising, game versus not only last week versus the Bengals, but when they won versus the Browns and they won, um, the other game. I can't remember who it was against now, but blanking a little bit. But that was an alarming game for the New York Giants is they were defeated 28-3. I mean, when you talk about you're playing your NFC East rival, you would think that the Giants would be able to give a little bit more fight because it is their rival. You talk about rivalry games and what they bring. To me, it brings out the best in every player, and we didn't see that from the New York Giants this week. We saw their offensive line fold. We saw the defense not play nearly as well as it has the past few weeks, as it did in their 2 wins this year, even as it did versus the Bengals and the Cowboys. I mean, this was a very disappointing loss to me. I thought they'd be able to play at least a little better. I didn't expect them to win, but I definitely expected them to put up a little bit more of a fight. Um, when I've been talking about change a lot, it's time to make change for the Giants. Drew Lock's the guy I want to see in there starting. We saw him come in, but I feel like he had just 8 plays. It was a game they were going to lose regardless, so he wasn't really playing for much. This is a team where we have to see change. We have to see Drew Lock come in at quarterback. We have to see them run the ball with Tyrone Tracy more because to me, Tyrone Tracy's a name where I saw rush a bunch against the Bengals, and to me, he played a lot better than Devin Singletary has. I get that Brian Dable has a familiarity to Devin Singletary, but this is a team where now um, they they need to start looking at what they have so that they can prepare for the future, prepare for the draft. I did just remember the other team they beat though. It was the Seattle Seahawks that week, and that obviously was a game they weren't supposed to win, but that was the promising game where I thought maybe they could turn this around, compete for a wild card spot, not only a wild card spot, but a weak NFC East division. But back to Tyrone Tracy there. Tyrone Tracy has been averaging almost 5 yards a carry. I mean, he's been an elite back when they give him the ball. And I think you gotta shift a little bit away from the veteran players. When you talk about veteran players, to me, veteran players are supposed to be the reliable guys, and Devin Singletary hasn't been that. Daniel Jones is a veteran now. He hasn't been reliable. A lot of these older players really just are not getting the job done. I think I would switch out one of your receivers for Jalen Hyatt, maybe see if you could get some trade value from him, or maybe even use him in the future because he's a guy when he was drafted last year, a bunch of people thought he was going to be the solution at wide receiver, and we haven't seen him play really at all unless the weeks that Malik Neighbors was hurt. And even then, I don't think they target him nearly enough. This when you talk about a team that's playing poorly, you have to focus on the future. The future is such a big thing when you talk about these teams that don't play well because you have to see what you have and what you need to improve upon. Obviously, the Giants, I think, now have made the decision at this point. Obviously, they should have. Daniel Jones is not the answer at quarterback. They're going to have to look for someone either in this upcoming draft or the next draft to fill that position. Um, but change is what we need to see from the Giants because if they don't change anything, the fans are going to abandon ship. They're not going to be supporting their team like we've seen Giants fans supporting their team since they won the Super Bowl in 2012. And I feel like Giants fans every year expect them to at least try to compete, and every year we're disappointed outside of 1 or 2 years the past 10 years that we've seen them make the playoffs. But even then, it's been disappointing playoff performances there. But to be fair to whoever is under the quarterback helm, Andrew Thomas is going to be out for a few weeks, and he is one of the Giants' top linemen. And I saw that line on Andrew Thomas's side. Andrew Thomas is a left tackle, I believe, and that side was really giving the Giants issues. I saw Daniel Jones get sacked twice from the left side when I was able to watch the game and take a peek at it. And it's something you have to always keep in mind that now one of their few elite linemen is out. Maybe they should start stacking the line towards the left to combat that. I'm not really sure what the solution is there, but definitely disappointing to have Andrew Thomas out, and I think you have to give a little bit of credit to Daniel Jones for staying in there and taking as many hits as he did because it was a tough game for the Giants to face an elite defensive line from the Eagles, and with having Andrew Thomas out and already a weak offensive line there, it's something that Giants fans are gonna have to keep in the back of their head that the quarterback's probably gonna get sacked a lot this year. But I think as long as the Giants show that they are committed to change, committed to the future, I think that the Giants fans will be on board, but we have to see them make some changes there. Talking about the New York Jets, they took a loss last Monday night, which I talked about. That was a huge game for them, possibly to get back on top of the AFC Eastern Division and make a new path forward with their new head coach or interim head coach at this point and see how that new playbook can look. And it was a disappointing game for the Jets that game, but I'm going to focus a little bit more on the game that happened last night. The Jets were facing a Steelers team that had Russell Wilson, who hasn't played a game this year at the helm. It should have been a much better game for the Jets. That defense, everyone talks about the Jets defense and how good it is. And coming into this year, I feel like the Jets weren't really as focused on what they could get done on the offensive side, but they focused on the positives they did have from last year, whatever few positives they did have in their defense. Obviously, they have some elite players there like Sauce Gardner, but that defense gave up 37 points to the Steelers. And that Steelers team has scored 30 points once this year, and it was against a weak Las Vegas Raiders team. Uh, that's definitely now something the Jets have to be thinking about. Is their defense not as good? Obviously, Robert Saleh was a defensive minded head coach there, and he made the defense play better. So maybe you have to think maybe that defense wasn't as good as we thought. Maybe it was Robert Saleh's coaching a little bit. I talked about I think it would be a mistake if they fired Robert Saleh mid-season, but they did. And now they have to live with the repercussions. They have to live with the fact that they have an interim head coach now, and they have to put a lot of the pressure and the responsibility on Aaron Rodgers, who I don't think they've done successfully. Aaron Rodgers threw another 2 interceptions last night, and when you're turning the ball over like that, you're not giving your team a chance to win. Uh, Aaron Rodgers, he got his guy in Devontae Adams. Everyone was hyping up the Devontae Adams trade, like, "Oh, Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers back again." Like, think about it in a realistic standpoint. They're both 2 aging players. Yes, they have some history there, some camaraderie, but we only saw Devontae Adams have 3 receptions for 30 yards last night. I thought we were gonna see, Aaron Rodgers target his guy more. Aaron Rodgers always is like, Aaron Rodgers wanted his guys when he came to the Jets, and it seems like he's gotten everyone he wanted. Seeing the way that Aaron Rodgers threw the ball to Allen Lazard, I thought, okay, maybe it was just a comfortability thing. Maybe getting Devontae Adams would would make him feel a little bit more comfortable there. Give him an elite receiver to throw to. Give the Jets that offensive piece they've been missing. But it didn't. We saw Devontae Adams only get 3 receptions. I mean, obviously, that could change in the coming weeks. Maybe it was because Devontae Adams hasn't played much the past few weeks. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt there, but Aaron Rodgers still couldn't find anything to get any way to get things done. I mean, I talked about using the weapons you did have in Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson still, I feel like, has not been getting the targets he deserves, but Breece Hall, I mean, has been a dual threat running back. He had 100 yards receiving last night, as well as the rushing yards he did get. This is a team where they have all the weapons on the offensive side. That was an elite defense everyone was talking about. Obviously, they did have the rough game, and I do think that is a point of concern there. But the Jets just really have not been playing up to everyone's expectations coming into the year. The Jets were supposed to be the saving grace in New York football, but New York football has just been disaster in general. I mean, obviously, no one expected the Giants to play well this year, but we did expect the Jets to play well, and the Jets have not been playing well. I mean, if I talked about change too, maybe it's time to start exploring options outside of Aaron Rodgers. Maybe it's time to look at other quarterbacks because Aaron Rodgers has not been the centerpiece that everyone thought he was going to be. Maybe they should run different plays. I really don't know what it's going to take for the New York Jets to turn the corner and play as well as everyone thought they were going to play this year. Definitely disappointing from the New York Jets. So I have one last thing. Obviously, the big thing I want to talk about is the World Series preview. And it's Dodgers Yankees. You have the biggest stars on the biggest stage. Dave Roberts did get me very upset with what he said that they already beat the crosstown rival. I don't think he understands that they're the little brother franchise in New York. It's like when you're a little brother and a big brother, the big brother's always gonna be the stronger, more competitive type of guy there. They I don't think they know what they're getting themselves into in this World Series. Like, the Yankees are a threat, and to treat them like they're just the New York Mets, like they are just any other team, and to discredit their path to the World Series is a little bit disgraceful, if you ask me, because they made it to the World Series. They played the team in the American League that had the best record in the Cleveland Guardians, which I don't think enough people have been saying. The Cleveland Guardians won their division. They were the number 2 seed. They had the second best record in the American League in the regular season. Like, they were a good team. Like, you can't discredit that. The fact that the Astros gave the Yankees troubles in years past, the Astros weren't a good team this year. Like, you can't just be like, "Oh, it's the Astros," and the fact the Yankees didn't play them, you have to discredit their whole run to the World Series. Like, you can't do that. You can't just simply go out there and be like, "Oh, the Yankees had an easy path to the World Series." They faced some of the league's best players. They faced Bobby Witt Jr. They destroyed the league's best closer in Emmanuel Clase. They faced, I want to say, a top 5 player in Jose Ramirez. I mean, the guy almost had a 40-40 season this year, got no credit for it. And they're acting like they played no one. You can't act like the Yankees didn't play the best teams in the American League because bottom line is those teams won in the prior rounds. The Royals won their series against against the Orioles. The Tigers won their series against the Astros. Like, that's what happened. They proved to be the better team in the postseason. And yeah, people are saying, "Oh, the hot team only wins in base is the only ones that win in baseball." The Yankees had a bye round. Like, I mean, they easily could have lost any sort of momentum they had. I mean, we saw it with the Phillies. A lot of people are blaming that the Phillies had the bye round this year as a factor as to why they lost. But we saw the two number 1 seeds who, guess what? They also had a bye, now be the 2 teams in the World Series. It's not always the hottest team that wins. To me, I think this postseason has proved the best team wins. And to discredit the fact that the Yankees made it to the World Series is just an abysmal take that I feel like most of the media is covering. The fact that the Yankees didn't play the Astros or the Orioles, guess what? They didn't play as well as other teams in the regular season. So they had to play in the wild card round and they landed up losing. And the Yankees took down every opponent in their way. And not only did they take their opponents down, they took them down with ease. They took the Guardians down in 5 games, and they took the Royals down in 4. Like, you can't discredit what the Yankees are doing. But now when you talk about the matchup itself, I don't think I could stress enough the fact that the Dodgers pitching is a huge issue there. I think that the Yankees proved they could face the league's best pitchers, and now they're gonna be facing pitchers that aren't that good. I mean, you're facing a bullpen game at least probably once or twice in the World Series. You're gonna be facing a rehabbing Walker Bueller, and to me, I think there has to be a little bit of a vengeance in the Yankees when they face Yamamoto. Yamamoto used the Yankees in the offseason to get his offer higher. He told everyone he wanted to be part of this historic franchise and then abandoned them once the Dodgers gave him a slightly higher offer. Like, there has to be some sort of uh, bad feelings there for the Yankees. You can't just discredit the fact Yamamoto did what he did in the offseason. Like, I mean, everyone thought Yamamoto was going to the Yankees. Everyone. Like, you asked any league expert, they thought Yamamoto was going to the Yankees, and he ended up turning his back on them. Like, he even said he was going to go to the Yankees for a lower offer. Like, this is a guy where he, bottom line, used the Yankees to get what he wanted. To me, that game is going to be very interesting because I think the Yankees will go out there with a fire under them, and they will land up really beating up on Yamamoto and getting to that bullpen that has been taxed throughout the whole playoffs. Yes, it's a good bullpen. I don't think it's nearly as good as the Guardians bullpen was. I think the Yankees pitching is a lot better than the Mets pitching was. So it kind of is when you're talking about this matchup, the Yankees face the best pitching, and now they're going to be facing probably the best hitting lineup they're going to be facing all postseason. I don't think I could discredit the Dodgers there, and the fact that they have so many different players: Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, Otani, and Will Smith, Max Muncy. I mean, they have a lot of good hitters there, but the Yankees lineup isn't anything to sleep on either. I mean, we've seen Gleyber Torres turn the page. We've seen Anthony Volpe bat over 300 this playoffs. This is a team where everything, it seems like this lineup was the question the past probably since 2017 when they started winning again and turning the page, was the issue in the postseason. And this Yankees lineup has proved they can produce runs. And not only can they produce runs, but they can produce runs against the best pitching. I don't think runs are going to be an issue at all. I am a little concerned about pitching because obviously you're going to be facing that great lineup, but they have Garrett Cole and Rodon 1 and 2. Like, those are two of the league's best pitchers as your number 1 and number 2 starter in the postseason. Like, those are guys that should go out there and shove. Garrett Cole's going to pitch 2 games. Rodon's going to pitch 2 games. Like, I mean, that should be the series right there. That should be 4 wins. And I think they could win a game with Schmidt and Heel. I think this series is going to be a lot more towards the Yankees than the media is giving them credit for. I think the Yankees are going to go out there and prove why, not only why they're there, but why they are the best team in all of baseball, not just in the American League. Yes, we won a pennant, but when you're a Yankee fan, the bottom line goal is not to win a pennant, but to win the World Series, to get that ring, to hold up the commissioner trophy like Giancarlo Stanton's instead. Like, this is the team. Soto thinks they're gonna win. I mean, I think Soto's staying. I saw after the Yankees Guardians, the away fans giving Soto all that love, and it looked like he was all about it. I think if the Yankees win the World Series, he's up. I think he's gonna stay, but that's a topic that's obviously going to be lingering for the Yankees until Soto does sign somewhere, hopefully with the Yankees. Um, this is a different team. You have the 2 best players. I don't wanna hear any more of this Shohei Ohtani's the best player on the planet. Shohei Ohtani is not the best player on the planet because I have not seen him step out in the field for the Dodgers. Aaron Judge plays an elite defense in center field every game. He goes out there and he plays it, and he hits at an elite level. Yes, he hasn't been hitting as well in the postseason, but we saw him kind of break out of that against the Guardians. I think he's going to be lingering in the back of their heads. I think if they make the lineup adjustment where they move Jazz Chisholm down, I don't know how you're going to pitch to that Yankees lineup. I think it's going to definitely be a high scoring series. Very exciting for the baseball world, very exciting for New York sports, obviously, because the Yankees are back in the World Series for the first time in 15 years. Um, but the job's not finished for the Yankees. I keep pointing back to that Kobe Bryant interview when they were up 2-0 in the finals, and he said, "Job not finished. Job's not finished when you're the Yankees. It's you win the World Series or it was a failure. Like if the Yankees were to lose against the Dodgers, it's a failure." But I don't even want to put that out there because I truly believe the Yankees have that winning attitude that is the difference maker in the World Series, in baseball, in the playoffs, in anything in general. I think that winning attitude is there, and I really do think the Yankees are going to beat the Dodgers in the World Series. But that is all I have for today. Definitely a busy time in New York sports. Definitely something to keep an eye on. Obviously, football has been a disaster, but the Yankees are back in the World Series, and it's going to be an exciting week for New York sports. All right. That's all I have. Empire State of Sports signing off. Thank you.